My name is Pastor Pete McNabb, and I thank you for joining us in the backyard of a neighbor across the street from our church at First John Methodist Church of Terrell. We're so blessed the Chavezes have built a fire for us to be part of this on Good Friday service that we're here tonight. You know, I'm blessed to have two of my friends with me tonight, too. I'm blessed to have Erin Herndon, who's our accompanist. She's over here. And also we have Taylor Grimminger, our choir director, who's here. And we are socially distanced 6 feet apart, approximately, so we're in good shape there. I'm glad to have Randy Henderson here in our videography work that's going on tonight. We're thankful for a Good Friday, to be here, to be together. We're thankful for the fire. It's reminding me, well, first of all, reminds me of my days as a Boy Scout as well as a Scout Master of troops, and how the fire sort of brought people together. But even more so, the fire has been something that's been around for centuries, for millennia, as far as bringing people together. And we come together for times of warmth, to get warm, although it's a beautiful night tonight. We don't really need the warmth so much, but we also come together for times of being with each other. And the loneliness that you may be experiencing right now in this sheltering-in-place world is very real, very palpable. And so I hope that you feel like you've got a seat by the campfire this evening with us, that you're part of our group on this Good Friday, that you're there. And so it's important because the campfire, for like I said, thousands of years, has brought people together to connect, so we are not isolated after a full day. So we are together. So you are part of this. You are together with us. The other thing is, what did they do when they were around the campfire? Well, a couple things. One of the things they did was to sing. And so we're going to have some music tonight. And I pray that it's a balm for your soul that helps connect you not only to us, but to Jesus on this night, this day of Good Friday, the day He gave His all for us, His life for us. So the music will connect our souls together and with our Lord. It's also a time for storytelling. And sometimes around the campfire, there'll be a time for stories, there'll be a time for jokes, there'll be a time for reflection as we come to reflect on who we are and whose we are. So I want to call us to begin with just a word of prayer. I have a prayer for a pandemic, because that's where we're in worldwide. None of us expected to be here. None of us would ever expected to be in this situation that's taken place seriously around the world, globally, that we're here. But this is where we are now. This is Good Friday. So the theme we have for tonight is Hopes Dashed. And, you know, my hope was to have a big Easter service this Sunday, and my hope was to have a Good Friday service tonight in our sanctuary with lots of people coming, but those hopes aren't taking place. We're here, so we're having to readjust, and all of us are readjusting wherever you are. So this is a prayer for a pandemic, and my minor inconveniences pale compared to what so many people are going through. So I want to just pray this prayer. If you would just join me where you are at home. May we, Lord, who are merely inconvenienced, remember those whose lives are at stake. May we who have no risk factors remember those most vulnerable. May we who have the luxury of working from home remember those who must choose between preserving their health or making the rent. And we who have the flexibility to care for our children when their schools close, remember those who have no options. And we who have to cancel our trips, remember those who have no place to go. And we who are losing our margin money in the tumult of the economic market, remember those who have no margin at all. And may we who settle in for a quarantine at home, remember those who have no home. As fear grips our country, let us choose love. During this time when we cannot physically wrap our arms around each other, let us yet find ways to be the loving embrace of God to our neighbors. Amen.
Amen.
That prayer was from Cameron Bell. Prayer for a pandemic. come together tonight, we're going to turn to the Gospel of John, chapter 18, and we'll take turns reading parts of it. But I want to reflect a little bit on this first to understand who we're focusing on as we prepare for this. So this is Good Friday, and what I want to do is really have you take a closer look at the Apostle Peter tonight. And so we're going to spend some time really trying to understand where he was at that time. You know, I think many of us can relate to Hope's Dashed theme. Many of us can relate to a time in our lives when we had great hopes for something to take place, and then to see the hopes dashed. It's a difficult spot. And so any reflections you guys have on what that means, I'd love to hear from you on that. In fact, if you're at home and you want to text in to me anything that you have on the idea of hopes dashed, I'd love to hear your thoughts on an experience of hopes dashed or a time when things had to be readjusted. But I want to just focus, before we read the Gospel of John, on the Apostle Peter, the leader really of the 12. He was very much the right-hand man, the lay leader, you might say, for Jesus' small group. And you think about the calling. There were four particular times in Matthew that I wanted to point out. One was the time when he was taken away from the life of fishing and given into the life of fishing for people. So it was early in the ministry when Jesus saw him and saw something in him and called him away from that. And how beautiful that is, that he answered the call. And you can imagine the anticipation of what God's doing. I know God called each of you, Taylor and Aaron, into forms of ministry with your useful gifts that you bring. I know He's called me into ministry with preaching and being a pastor. And you know, when you have the anticipation of what this leads to, all the possibilities of what that is. And so Matthew records that this calling to take Peter away from the life of fishing, for him to lay down his nets and follow Jesus, and actually become. So it must have been quite a bit of, you might say, excitement in his life. The idea that this is going to be great, this is going to be amazing. I don't know what it's going to lead to, but it's really powerful. Then there was another example, also in Matthew, a few chapters later, about his identification of who he was. His identity changed, and his identity changed when Jesus called him and said, well, his name had been Simon. And he says, and he called on, and Jesus asked him, who do people say that I am? And he said, you are. Some say that you're Elijah. Some say you're one of the prophets. He says, but who do you say that I am? He says, you are the Messiah. You are the Son of the living God. He said, blessed are you, Simon, because you've not learned this just from people talking about this. You've learned this from the Holy Spirit inspiring you. So he says, blessed are you, Simon, and from now on I will call you Peter, for you are the rock. Cephas, Peter, meaning that rock. You are the rock on which I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not stand against it. In other words, he was calling on Peter not to be playing defense, but to be playing offense, to be going literally into the gates of hell, to burst through there, reach souls for Jesus Christ. And this was a very amazing moment. Peter's identity changed from being Simon to becoming Peter. And so there was a great sense of newness in who he was. And so you see, there's other times that Peter continues to be growing in his faith and growing his relationship with Christ. Later on in Matthew 17, Jesus takes not the 12, but just the three closest friends of the 12. He takes Peter, James, and John, really close to Jesus, and he takes them to the mountain, and they go there. It's a Mount of Transfiguration. And in those moments, Peter sees Jesus. He sees Jesus, he sees Moses, he sees Elijah, representing the law and the prophets. Jesus is standing there among them. And in those moments, I mean, that closeness, I mean, it's like he's saying, come on, I want just the closest three to come together with me. We're going to go experience this. And we experience this, and Jesus' clothes were changed bright as white as they could be, like cleaner than any launderer's soap, just gleaming. And he was there with Moses and Elijah on top of that mountain. Peter doesn't even know what to do. He says, Jesus, why don't we build 3 houses here and put one for each of us, each of you guys, and we'll stay there with you. Now we've got work to do. So they go down. So, it's just story after story after story that we see. Let's say, louder? Okay, louder. Okay, I'll try to be louder. But why don't you go ahead and come closer, Randy, because people might hear us. Just kind of walk around, if you don't mind with that, so people can kind of see and look at Taylor, Aaron, others. Maybe a little louder, so good to hear. So I continually see this identity of Jesus and Peter's identity changing. And then, of course, the ultimate thing that you see, not ultimate, but one of the most amazing, vivid, we have in our stained glass windows, is when Jesus is walking on the water. And Peter says to Jesus, Lord, give me the word, and I'll come out there and do that. And so Jesus says, come on out, come join me. So he comes on out, and of course he walks in the water, and for a while it's like, wow, I really can't walk on water. Just think about this. I mean, it's just amazing. And then after he looks around, he gets a little afraid, he starts to sink, and he says, Lord, save me. Jesus takes him by the hand and puts him in the boat. So Peter has gone through the emotions of being a follower of Jesus and being part of that inner group. Amazing life. And he probably would hope that Palm Sunday that we're coming into Jerusalem, we're coming into Jesus' kingdom. Now look what's going to take place. Now it's just amazing. And then 5 days later, you see it all come crashing down. You see it come crashing down, and his Savior being nailed to a cross and taken away. And before he's even taken away, we see the trial. And so we get back to the fire, because in those moments there's a charcoal fire. And I'm going to have you pick up and read that for me, Taylor. There's a charcoal fire, and this follower of Jesus, this one who would lay down his life, take up a sword, whatever he could do to build the kingdom, he left everything behind to follow Jesus. This one suddenly gets cold feet. So there he is by the charcoal fire at night, surrounded by strangers. Let's hear what happens on this dark night of Peter's soul.
So the soldiers, their officer, and the Jewish police arrested Jesus and bound him. First they took him to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it was better to have one person die for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest, but Peter was standing outside at the gate. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out, spoke to the women who guarded the gate, and brought Peter in. The women said to Peter, "You are not also one of the man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the slaves and the police had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it, warming themselves. Peter also was standing with them and warming himself.
Wow. So after 3 years of following, what you just read it, Taylor, it's so clear. After 3 years of following so closely and doing so many things, what happens? Twice in there, he denies.
He rejects them.
Yes, rejects them. So I heard you said the woman first who's there, she guarded the gate and brought Peter in. He wanted to just get by the fire. He wanted to sort of what? Just be anonymous a little bit. Just kind of wanted
blend
to
in.
Blend in. Yeah, didn't want to be seen. How do you think his fear level was at that point?
I think he probably just didn't want to die. That primal fear of self-preservation took over, and that's exactly what he did. He's like, okay, well, that's Jesus' problem now, it's not mine.
Something's wrong in him. He doesn't just run away totally. He runs kind of be in earshot, right? Just like he wants to kind of see what's going on. He can kind of see Jesus over there. But there's these people by this fire, and maybe there was something inside wanting to just get warmer. I mean, be by the fire. But he had a fear. And here this lady looks at him and says, "You're not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" So in other words, she asks it kind of as a negative. You're not. So it gives them an out. Not me. I'm not. Wow. I mean, can you imagine being in a situation where you don't want to be identified with this person? You just can't be seen with this person. It's so horrific. And then later on, he's warming himself, and the priest, they're questioning Jesus, and they're warming themselves. And he says, I think another time he denies that he knows that he stands with them, warming himself, and denying that it's him. Wow, it's really a sign of hope's dashed. And, I'm going to have Aaron read a part in a minute. I want you just to reflect on hope's dashed. It's I'm sure there's times in your life, if you think about it, when your hopes were dashed. I got to share with you a little something that maybe some of you have had weddings put off this coronavirus season that we've been dealing with. I say season as if it's an annual thing. It's not. This was the first time in 100 years we're having a major plague like this really come through and take over things. I had right after the shelter-in-place orders went in, or right before it was totally shelter-in-place, I ended up doing a wedding for my second cousin, and wow, it was a plan they had for a big wedding with about 125 RSVP guests at a villa that they had already planned for a celebration. And we ended up having it in the park with just 14 people at a gazebo, keeping our social distance from each other. And it was just the hope was this big wedding, and then to see that dashed. Although they had great spirit about them. My second cousin Jake and his wife Kristen. I was blessed to be part of that. But my goodness, change of plans. For me personally, my birthday was amid this whole thing. And it was one of those. Yeah. Taylor's too. Your birthday was in here too. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh man, mine was one of those speed limit birthdays. Has a big sign about it. It's a round number.
Gosh.
So I had plans. I mean, we talked about going out to Lake Texoma and having a family get together and doing something big out there. And then we just kind of scaled it back to just having dinner at our house with a few friends and relatives. Then we got down to maybe just having my sons over. That's it. And then finally we said no. It's gonna be the drive-through at Soul Man Barbecue, just me and Darian. And that's our birthday, and that's it, man. And that is the birthday, this big 60th birthday. Soul Man Barbecue drive-through. That's what it's gonna be. And I hopefully am mature enough as a person and as a Christian that that's no big deal for me. I'm okay. I really am okay. But when I was 14 years old, it was different. When I was 14 years old, my grandfather and I had the exact same birthday, April Fool's birthday. So April 1, April 1st, And so every birthday was a big deal. I mean, it was like we shared a birthday. Both of us had red hair too. Well, his had a little lotion that made it red, a little rinse, you might call it. But anyway, he had red hair too. We were like, oh man, I mean, it was just, we were really close. We shared that birthday. Well, every year, not only was it a birthday, but it was April Fool's pranks. It was a whole thing. I mean, the family we had a spoon that had a fly that was glued to it permanently, sealed on there. Oh, there's a fly on my spoon. Oh yeah, it's always on your spoon. We had all kinds of fun things we did. Every year, the birthday celebration was bigger and bigger to have with Grandpa and my birthday to share that. And when I was 13, we had a party, and then shortly before the 14th birthday, about a week before, I remember I was on a camp out with the scouts, and I got back home, and my dad said, your mom needs to talk to you about something. I thought, oh no, what is it? While I was gone on camp, my grandfather passed away. He died about a week before what would have been his 80th birthday. And all the hopes of having the birthdays together, everything just changed. My world just changed totally. This connection with my grandfather, everything fell apart, and the family was just devastated. He had died fairly suddenly, out walking on the golf course. And any idea of even having a birthday just went out the window. I was so down, so hurt, and so selfish too. But at the same time, as a teenager, it hurt so badly. And I remember that my parents didn't even get a birthday card for me. They were just so stunned by it. My older brother gave me a headlight for camping with batteries, and I almost just rejected it. I don't even need this. I don't even want this. I was so broken by the birthday being called off. everything had changed. I just cried. So I can imagine how people feel right now if your wedding's being put off, or your birthday, or some special event that you had planned. Maybe it was a special event for your company that got canceled, or some kind of retreat, or vacation. Lots of things have been canceled. I can think what it feels like to have those hopes dashed. So the hopes are dashed, and I want to have Aaron read the second part of that scripture now. If you could read that, see how Simon Peter was reflecting that.
Then the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus answered, I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where all the Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who heard what I said to them. They know what I said. When he had said this, one of the police standing nearby struck Jesus on the face, saying, Is that how you answer the high priest? Jesus answered, If I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me? Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. They asked him, You are not also one of his disciples, are you? He denied it and said, I am not. One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, Did I not see you in the garden with him? Again, Peter denied it, and at that moment, the cock crowed.
Wow. So 2 more times he's denied. And also it's right in the midst of a time, Aaron, where Jesus is being struck and he's being beaten. And this Savior of the world that he'd been so close to is on trial. He's getting slapped, beaten for speaking the way. So how's Peter in this? He's going from bad to worse, isn't he? Really going down. 2 more times that you just read, denies. He even knows that what is the wording of this. You're not also one of the disciples, are you? I'm not. The one whose relative's ear had been cut off. And Peter cut off the ear of his relative. He says, Did I not see you in the garden? And he says, No, that wasn't me. I think one version actually says, Wait a second, you're him because you speak like him. You have, one version said, I believe, right, the dialect, the same dialect. You speak like a Galilean. You have that sense. He said, No, that wasn't me. Imagine having a friend deny you like that, betray you. I guess that's not betrayal, that's denial, right? It's deny they even know you. Kids can be so rough, can't they? Especially watching kids grow up. I remember some kids in my class that used to get picked on, girls and boys. But ones that people used to just pick on, and I can remember never really standing up for them. I remember never really saying, yeah, that's my friend. I remember not being there for them. I wonder how it felt for Jesus to look outside and see Peter. He's not going to stand up for me. He's not going to even say he knows me. Kids can be so cruel like that. Where do we learn that? We learn to be so cruel, to not even be willing to stand with a friend. Is it fear of being linked to them? Fear, maybe very real fear, like you were saying, Taylor. He doesn't want to get killed. Self-preservation, I guess. What else could be there? What else could drive him into separating himself from his close friend? It's deep to be there. Hope's dashed. I think a little bit of Peter was dying that night. His hopes were dying. The light was going out of his soul that night. He wasn't being put on a cross, but it was like he was. Part of him was dying as the shadows were cast. I'll read the rest of it. It says, verse 28, Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill what Jesus had said when he indicated the kind of death he was to die. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" I think a little bit of Pilate died that night too, or that day, that Good Friday. Here was one who had risen as a leader, come into his own, given authority, placed in charge, but put between a rock and a hard place, being forced by the public, the crowd, to put a man to death, a man who'd done no wrong. He knew it was wrong to do this, yet for self-preservation, for desire to hang on to what he had, to not ruffle the feathers during the Passover or a big public event, Pilate was willing to go along to get along. He was willing to do something that was wrong to save his own skin. Jesus on the cross that Good Friday said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus too realized the feeling of abandonment, what it meant. Yet even in that cry, we shouldn't confuse it with God not watching, with God not caring. Whatever it is you're going through right now at home, sheltering in place, don't be confused to think that God doesn't know what you're facing right now, and that God has turned God's back on you. Because God has not done that. God did not turn God's back on Jesus. God was with his Son in his darkest hour as he bore the sins of the world on that cross. God is there with us now.
Let all mortal flesh keep silence, and with fear and trembling stand. Ponder nothing earthly minded, for with blessing in his hand, Christ, O God, to earth descended, our full homage to demand. King of kings, yet born of Mary, as of old on earth he stood, Lord of lords in human man. as the light of light descended from the realms of endless day, that the powers of hell may vanish, as the darkness clears away. At his feet the six-winged seraph, cherubim with sleepless eye, veil their faces to the presence, as with ceaseless voice they cry, Alleluia, 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 Lord Most High.
As we look into this fire, as we reflect on Hope's dash, know that you are not alone. Know there's an ember in there. There's a flicker. This is Friday, but Sunday's coming. May we pray. In darkness and in silence, we stand with Peter and the first followers. Through our tears, we watched the Lord of our life shed blood for us and die in pain and in victory. Father, into your hands we commit our spirits, dying to self. May we live for Christ. It is finished.